Hi, this is Jeff from the Ozark Mountains. That's in Missouri, in the USA. Well, today we're going to talk about taking this and turning it into this. Just taking vintage computer documentation and turning it into a searchable PDF. So, without further ado, let's get started. So this video will be kind of an overview of the process I use and the software that I generally use. Of course, there's lots of different software and ways you could go about things, so this is just what works for me. So we'll start out with acquiring the scans through a flatbed scanner and with the CZUR ET24 Pro. And then we'll look at editing those with programs such as GIMP and IRFANVIEW, and finally creating a searchable PDF using a program called PDF Creator. So first, let's acquire some images. Now, most people are familiar with a flatbed scanner. This is a little fancier one. It has an automatic document feeder, so rather than having to lay your papers here on the platen each time and close it and press the scan button, you can set loose pages in here and it'll pull them through one at a time. Now, also on a lot of these newer ones with a document feeder, it has an extra little glass here and also one on the top, so it will scan both sides of a two-sided document at the same time. That's kind of handy. It saves a lot of time. It saves trying to turn around or duplex pages, and particularly on pages that might not be in the best physical condition. That's a big help. These work really good. Generally the output they produce is really good. It needs just a little bit of correction. The problem is you need loose pages. So for a little book like this that's stapled, you can pull the staples out and scan it, and it's not a big deal. If you have an actual bound book like this Sharp PC 1500 manual, then you've got to cut the spine off of there to get loose pages. Now this one I didn't cut myself. I asked the print shop at work if they would do that for me. They've got a big fancy computerized guillotine cutter that made that a very simple process. The downside to doing this, of course, is that your book is now a bunch of loose pages, but it does make for a nice scan, and it's very quick and very accurate. You can, later on, like punch holes in here for a 3-ring binder or a comb binder or a spiral bound. The spiral bound is probably the nicest for laying it out and making a nice little book. I have a comb binder I think I'll use to put this back together later. Now, what's another choice for scanning books? Another option for scanning a book is to use a document camera like this CZUR ET24 Pro. I bought this last year when they had their Indiegogo campaign when they were developing this, and it was at a bit of a discount then. I think now they're about $630, so this is a bit of an expensive option. These document cameras can go from sort of expensive like this to very, very expensive like this really fancy book scanning robot. So there's many of them in different price points with different capabilities. This is a pretty good bang for the buck, and I am happy with its performance. So this has a camera that looks down. It's got a couple lights that point down. There's a light back here which goes this direction, so for shiny things this side light is better than the top light. For paper, the top light works great, and it kind of helps eliminate shadows from the spine right here. And the way this works, if you take a picture of a book with a regular camera, it's going to look like this. It's not very good. So what this thing does is it has 3 line lasers, which are back here, which shine down on the page, and that lets the camera look at how the book is distorted, that classic book shape, and to compensate for that in software. So hopefully we'll be able to see the laser here. Let me zoom in. So I'm going to press the foot pedal, and we just saw the laser there, And the software will do its best to compensate for the distortion in the book. Of course, this is a more manual process than the document feeder on our flatbed scanner, but you don't have to take your book apart, which is an advantage. Some old books I have problems like this, a broken spine, which makes holding them for scanning a little more difficult. Sometimes they have creases, or the pages have been, slightly water damaged over time, so they're kind of crinkly. And the line lasers on here are compensating for this, classic book shape, and for wrinkles and things like that in the pages, it's not going to do as good a job. So to scan a little book like this on the flatbed scanner, of course, we need to take out any staples or paper clips or anything like that. So we'll get rid of these things. And we'll find where the staples are in the middle. I prefer using a small screwdriver as opposed to a staple remover because you do less damage. Just go slow. And we have a loose booklet. We can kind of flatten the sheets out like that. Now the only downside here is these are kind of odd-shaped pages. So we can put them on the flatbed scanner and see what size they are. And of course, if we're using the ET24 here, we could just lay them out like that. One handy thing on the flatbed scanner is it will give you a rough idea of your paper size. Legal size, or 14-inch long, is right there, but it's a little more than 8.5 inches wide. It might be closer to B4 size, but it's kind of an odd size. We should be able to use the document feeder here. When the pages are stapled together, the staple puncturing there can stick holes together, so I've made sure that all the pages are separate and kind of fold them back along that fold line. Adjust your guides so it helps keep the paper centered, but it's not tight. On this particular scanner, I'll go to Scan, to PC, File Folder, two-sided on, flip on the short edge. Set my other settings. Going to make this grayscale, 300 dots per inch. This will also do 600, but 300 is a much smaller file and it still does really good quality. Document size. And I want the output to be in JPEG. This is a drawback on many scanners, is that they will only output JPEG files, which is a shame because you have some compression losses there, but I don't want a PDF made out of this directly. Okay, two-sided scan, grayscale, 300 dots per inch, legal size. And then we press OK. And start. And you can see for a few pages like this document feeder is convenient, but it doesn't save that much time. And if you've got a few hundred pages like this, it makes it a lot faster, but you have to take the book apart. Okay, there we go. And all our pages are still in order. Now, you notice I didn't put this thick cover through there. I'm going to do it manually. So, first thing I'm going to do is a grayscale of the inside. Scan to PC. Okay. Let's say finish here, and then I'm going to do the same thing but set it to color to do the front cover. So we got our little booklet put back together here, popped the staples back through. Can't tell we took it apart. You know, if we'd done that on the CZUR, we wouldn't have to done all taken apart and put it back together and fooling with it. But for something little like this, it's, you know, 6 to 1, half dozen the other. You can do it either way. I'm going to turn on the overhead light on the scanner, and you can kind of see we have some reflections in here from the overhead light. And that's a problem because it's going to shine right back up into the camera. So for shiny surfaces like covers, you can turn off the overhead light and turn on this rear light, which is just back here. And of course, our camera is pointed down this way, so we're going to see the reflection here, but the camera here, you know, above isn't going to see it. So this works really good for shiny covers. The first book I did on this thing was this little Computing the Sciences book for the EL 5503 Sharp. And, you know, pretty much this book is in good shape. There are some pages which were kind of folded a little on the corner. And I use these little finger cots, which come with the CZUR scanner. You go like this, you press the foot pedal, and it digitally removes these from the image. It's pretty slick. That worked really well. These pages are in very good shape. With this smaller book, one thing I learned to do was make sure the book was slid up kind of like this, so all 3 line lasers hit the book. With these, you know, matte white pages, the overhead light works great. The next book I did was this guy, which, as you can see, is not nearly in as good a shape. Actually, I'm going to turn on the overhead light here. It's better with our camera pointed down this way. The pages are curled. Some of them have been wet and they're curly, and it was a real challenge trying to hold these pages relatively flat because they're, you know, gone all over the place like this. With the finger cuts, sometimes you would get a good image, sometimes you wouldn't. And I tried multiple things, and I finally found these stationary clamps on Amazon. I'll put a link to them below. And I just clamped them on the edges like this, you know, kind of pushed the page as flat as I could, clamped it on the edge like that. And I noticed that if I buffed this side with some Scotch-Brite, it made it a little dull, and that didn't show up on the camera. You can see here's the shiny original side, and here's the buffed side, which is dull. This worked really well. It greatly improved the image quality. And the scanner kind of ignores this flat black stuff all around here, so it ignored the clamp. That worked wonderful. The software they have to see the flat black works great. Another problem with these books is they're made to be inexpensive. The pages are thin, and we can see right through multiple pages. This is also a problem on the flatbed scanners. Through the document feeder where it's imaging both sides at once, it's not as big a problem. What I did is got a pack of flat black cardstock. Stuck between pages like this. And this sounds counterintuitive at first. You know, it looks darker on the right side here, but you notice we can't see multiple pages through it, whereas you can on this side. And you'll get a much better scan off of this. So you can use this flat black paper trick on flatbed scanners and on document cameras like this. This worked great. It's a little fiddly. I found, you know, I kind of slid the paper in like this, you know, folded it over, put my clip on there. It's kind of time consuming, but it made for a much better scan. I wanted to do a quick tour around the CZUR document camera here, since this is a device many people won't be familiar with. Starting on the back panel here, we have an HDMI out. We have a button input, which is for this a hand switch they include, or my favorite here is the foot pedal that they include. You just step on this to have it take the picture, the USB output to your computer, the power in, and a power switch. Now, when you're using the HDMI output, you can't use the USB-C and vice versa. This is designed if you just want to use this as like a presentation camera. You can also use it as a presentation camera through the USB. We'll see that in the software in a bit. And on the base of the unit, we have 4 buttons. This turns the overhead light on, 2 different levels, enlarge and reduce for use in the HDMI document camera mode, and take a picture button for the same mode. And I forgot to point out on the back, this is our side light, and that's the on-off button for the side light. And a little shaky cam here just to give you an idea of what is on the panel here at the top. We've got power, camera, and microphone LEDs. There is a little microphone hole just here at the front. And you've got an LCD. This will be useful when you're using it in presentation mode. I've also found it's handy getting the book aligned to start with, and from then on I'm usually staring at the computer. Let's scan a few pages and we'll see how it works and how the CZUR software works. Not long after I started working on this video, I was coincidentally contacted by CZUR, and I told them, hey, I already bought the machine through the Indiegogo campaign, but I'd be glad to provide some feedback. And by the time I got back to them a few weeks later after using the machine, there had been a software update and they already fixed one of the problems I noticed, so good on them. They were also very responsive when I asked for things like being able to export in something other than JPEG, so I just want to give them props for being responsive to users' comments. Okay, I've got a little book set up over here to scan, and you can see the scanning software is up on the computer. And we'll click the button here to go into the scan mode. And for a cover like this, I want to go into a color capture. And I like using a manual selection. And you can drag these handles around to get it to the size of your book. And you'll notice that on the video camera here, this looks great. The light source is from above, so it's not reflecting directly into the camera. From a document camera's point of view, that doesn't look so good. So I can turn off the overhead light and turn on the side light. And of course, from our video camera, that looks bad, but for the document camera, that looks great. Now, the cover on this book is in great shape. Some of them are a little curly and it can be hard to image them properly. So for those, I'll put a piece of old scanner glass on there. This is from an old flatbed scanner. And you notice we can see the side lights in the background there, so I'll put a little piece of black paper on there just to hide that. Now I've got a nice flat cover to image. I am going to press my foot pedal. See, it takes a picture of that, and we've got a nice picture. Now for this cover, I could have done it without the scanner glass, but I wanted to demonstrate that. Now for the inside pages, I am going to set it to a grayscale capture. And facing pages like this, you can see it gives us a virtual book spine. I'll just open up here to some random pages. And we are going to use the finger cots. And yes, finger cots is a real word. I had to look it up because I hadn't heard it before. It refers to the little finger covers, or finger condoms, some people call them, that people that do manual assembly will sometimes wear to protect their fingertips. So with the software set in grayscale mode, it does an excellent job at digitally removing these finger cots from the image. So we just bring our book like this, press the foot pedal, and it does its magic, flattens out the pages and gives us 2 pages. We flip the page and lather, rinse, repeat. think it would have been better if I had the book up a little further this way to make sure all 3 line lasers are on it. So I'm going to retake the page like this. This is much harder to do when you've got a video camera in your face. Now, if you get into a case like that where you see you have one image you didn't like, you can go back and redo just that one image. And if you have a split page like this, it'll take both sides and inject them into the right place and rename them and everything. I'll show you that in the software. So let's go over to the computer now and we'll look at the rest of the software. Okay, I have piled up a few things on under the camera here just to give you an idea of the depth of field of this camera. It does a pretty good job. One thing I just realized I did when I switched to doing the pages, I forgot to switch the top light back on, so our scans might be a little dark, but we'll soldier on. I am going to go back to here, and we can now see our cover. We can go down through our pages. 48, 49, 48, 49. I'm going to delete these last 2. They're the ones I retook, but they weren't really necessary. So I just select both of those and hit the trash can. And there we go. So we can see from our images here that it's done a pretty good job of straightening the book out. This is where the spine was really bent in like that, but it's done a good job. There's a little shadow from the spine, and of course we got some bleed through because I didn't put the black paper in there. But I'll pop in a picture here of a non-corrected image of a book, and you can see the magic that it's done in rendering this page out this nicely. Now, this software does have the ability to help correct these pages. I will select this image and go into color mode, and I found Auto Enhance does a good job on its own. And I will click confirm. And you can see it's increased the contrast. It got rid of a lot of that background noise, and we just have a few dirty spots left, and it's a little bit skewed. But that's okay. I found that the autocorrect does a good job in this software. You may choose to export it directly and further edit it in GIMP or something like that. We can directly edit from the CZUR software into a PDF. A searchable PDF means it runs OCR on it, or to a TIFF file. A TIFF file is like a zip folder. It's a container that holds multiple other graphics images of different formats. So if I select all our files here and say we want to export that as a TIFF, color, because I have that one color cover in there. Normally I like imaging the covers separately since they're color. No compression. I'm not sure what effect this compression actually has. I think we get JPEGs directly from the camera. And we'll do that. I'm going to export back into and overwrite my original test file here. Yes. And we exported those. Okay. Now, the other feature that this CZUR has is the visual mode. We can go like this, and now we can use this, for presentations through the computer. So again, you can see the very good depth of field we have. We can select drawing tools and draw on the screen. We can enlarge, reduce. Use a laser pointer to highlight things. We can take a screenshot of that and save our screenshots. And if we go back to the main visual page here, there is our saved screenshot, which is pretty interesting. And we can open files and add them to here, and all sorts of things like that. So this might be useful if you want to present something to somebody, or use it as a webcam to show something like that. It's an interesting additional feature of this document camera. Now let's take a look at GIMP and some other software we might use to help further edit our images if we wanted to. Both the CZUR software and our flatbed scanner will directly produce PDFs, and that's good for many situations. But what if we need to touch up our images, or we have a funny paper size like we did here for this little booklet? Well, this is where other image editing softwares and PDF creation software comes into mind. The two pieces of image editing software I like to use for this are GIMP and IRFANVIEW, and I'll put links to those below. Those are both free. And I found it really helpful to keep notes about each book I was doing and the steps I took roughly. So if I needed to replicate anything, or if I had a similar book later, it would give me ideas of what to do. I didn't have to figure it out again. So this particular booklet I scanned as an 11 by 17 paper size at 300 dots per inch. 300 dots per inch is 11.8 dots per millimeter. So in pixels, this image is this many pixels. The book size, however, is this size, 175 by 245 millimeters, which is this many pixels. And of course, it is rotated left 90 degrees. So the first thing I would need to do is rotate it right. So to give you an idea what we're after, this is what we're starting with, and we want to get to this. So for instance, in GIMP, I would go to Image, Transform, Rotate 90 degrees clockwise, and there we go. There's also a rotate here. This is like for rotating the image on the canvas, and the rotate here in image. Everything in this image drop down here acts on the whole image. It's kind of confusing, but it makes sense once you start playing with it for a while. And after this, I would do something like crop the image mostly to size for both sheets here. And I think I hold down Shift here to get like a freeform crop like that. There we go. And then I want to go Image, Flatten Image, and now I'm just down to this. And if I enlarge this to 50%, which you would do with your view menu here or down here at the bottom, I've got some hotkeys set up for that. Nice thing in GIMP, you can set up hotkeys for about everything. And if we want to fix things like this little spot here, we can use the clone tool. Well, it's a pretty decent brush size. Press Control click. And kind of copy over it like that, and we can keep working on it. We can do the same thing with this missing edge here. Just fix that right up. Oops, moving like that. So we can keep doing that and touch up any sections we want to. This cover was not too bad, but sometimes you can have a rip or something like that you want to take care of. And then it's really important not to save this back as a JPEG. The flatbed scanner produces JPEGs. We want to save this in the GIMP internal format, which is an XCF file. It's unique to GIMP, kind of like Photoshop or whatever has PSD files. And then we can export PNGs or something out of this later. So I wouldn't go back to using a JPEG. At least use a PNG, which is a lossless compression. After I touch this up, then I would split these pages, which is nice. The CZUR scanner automatically splits the pages for us, but we would have to do that manually here and number our pages correctly and then create our PDF from that. Now the files produced by those few pages that we scanned on the CZUR. They're in a TIFF file, which, as you remember, is a container. And when this starts up, it's going to say open pages as layers. We want to select images. I'm going to tell it to open all 5 of these. If you've got a few hundred pages, you may only want to open 5 or 10 at a time. So we've got our scanned in files loaded now, and you can see we've got a lot of bleed through because there's thin pages. I didn't put the black paper behind there. I was kind of purposely creating a worst case scenario, but it's not as bad as it looks. I'm going to increase the magnification. I've got a hotkey set up for that, but you can also do it down here. I find for most cases 50% and 25% are the most helpful to me. And then I'm going to go up to the colors menu, brightness and contrast. Crank up the contrast just a bit. And I can get rid of all that bleed through, and it hasn't affected our text at all. And, for the rest of this in the corner or, spots like this, I'll use the eraser tool. You can select the size, the hardness, which is kind of how blended is it on the edge. Just kind of go like this. You can get, the corners and things like that. There's always black in the corners. Speaking of that, it's kind of hard to tell because it has this selection thing on the edge. You can go to here and deselect show layer boundary, then you can see if you've got any black hiding out on the edge. What I would do often for a case like this, though, because a lot of these pages in these smaller books I scanned weren't in great shape, is I would wind up using the crop tool, cropping in tight like this. And always go image, flatten to avoid any confusion, and then go image canvas size. And this book size was 148 by 210 millimeters. It's an A5 at 300 dots per inch. That is 1865 by 2646. I have these unlinked, and I'm going to say center, resize, and then if I go image, flatten, now I'm relatively centered here, and we got rid of all the black edges in one fell swoop. It's a lot faster that way. If you want to be really picky and get the page centered both in X and Y just right, you can turn on your grid. I set GIMP to automatically use a 40 pixel grid, and zoom in a little bit. You can select this whole area like this. Control X, Control V, zoom in, and then you can move this section like this. If you kind of cut and paste just the area with text in the center of your document, you can slide that about inside the canvas without changing the canvas size. That's something I should point out, that your canvas size is like the paper size, and your image size is the scale of the image on that paper. So you can enlarge an image so that it overflows your canvas or your piece of paper. So that's the difference between those two things. And then when I'm done moving that around, I can turn the grid off. The grid menu's here. I've got it set up to use Alt-G. I will flatten it again. And that page looks pretty good now. If there's a page that was maybe a little distorted because it got wet or something, sometimes you can wind up with a situation where stuff's a little crooked or whatnot. I find it helpful to, let's see, we'll just do this box here as an example. I'm going to cut and paste that. There we go. The computer had to think. And turn on my grid and enlarge that. And you can see that this corner's out a little bit. This corner's down a little bit. So this has some skew to it. And skew is like saying that it needs to be rotated. So your image is just rotated at an angle on the paper. You can use transform, rotate, and you can think of all these settings as working on the lower left-hand corner. So if we bring that down, see, it kind of straightens up this edge a little bit, but we're kind of high in this edge. So this one might be a little more distorted, pulled out in this corner because this page was a little messed up. For that, we can use Unified Transform and tweak that in like that. So you don't have to do these things. If you just want to go the extra mile and kind of, you know, tweak everything as good as possible, then you can use these tools. Just play around with them and, you know, see what you can do. I find it a lot of fun to see what problems I can fix, or if there's a rip or a hole in the page, you can cut and paste individual letters to fill in the holes. That's kind of interesting to do. And you can hit reset, you know, to undo those changes. Now, when would I start with IRFANVIEW? Well, for instance, this is the PC 1500 manual that I had the spine cut off of, and I scanned all 100 and whatever pages. There were edges like this where some extra glue got through and caused a problem. And, you know, you always get a little junk around the corners. So the big strength of IRFANVIEW is that it has this wonderful batch conversion mode. And you can use this just to rename files or change formats. For instance, you can download a IRFANVIEW plugin that'll let it read the XCF files from GIMP. This makes it really quick and easy to convert all of your GIMP files to PNG so you can make a PDF out of them. If I want to crop out and clear all of these edges on these files automatically rather than manually like I just did in GIMP, I can use the advanced mode here and go into canvas size, settings, and I'm telling it to crop with a negative number, which means it's going to come in 25 pixels this way and make that space white all the way around the image. And it won't be quite enough on this page, but it's fine for most of the pages. It's a little different than this crop up here. This is a really handy setting. And I found for these pages, just through experimentation, that bumping the contrast up to 50 and 10 and sharpen really helped out a lot. And then you would add your list of files here that you wanted to change. For example, yeah, we'll just use the desktop. Okay. And it's going to convert that JPEG to a PNG. Hit Start Batch. 0 error, 0 warnings. It worked that fast. IRFANVIEW is really, really fast. It does a good job. It's not, doesn't have as many editing options as something like GIMP, but what it does, you can do in a batch format very, very quickly. It's well worth learning how to use. There is a plugin you can get for GIMP that'll help you automate with the GUI the files in GIMP, but I've used IRFANVIEW for a while and I'm really familiar with how it works. So with a combination of these tools, you can edit your images to whatever state you wish and have them ready for creating a PDF. So that's what we'll look at next. So the next step is creating a PDF. Again, there's lots of programs out there that can do this. I use a program called PDF24 Toolbox. It has a really goofy user interface, but it does a good job once you figure out the interface. Since we have images here that we want to create a PDF from, we go to Images to PDF. We choose our files. This is another manual that I scanned. I have all the pages here that I've already touched up. So I am going to go Control A, open. And it'll give you a thumbnail of all of them so you can check that they are in the right order. And normally as I edit them, I make sure the page numbers match the pages, or the file number, page 56 matches the actual physical page number. And do something like, front cover, inner, rear cover, outer, something like that. So I can tell they're in the proper order. The paper here, or the canvas size on these images, are set correct for the dot per inch they are. So I'm going to say use the dots per inch, which is 320, to determine the paper size. That way they should come out okay. And then click Create PDF. And it'll think there's 100 pages, so this is going to take a while. So when it's done, I'll come back. Okay, it has finished all 107 pages or whatever it was. So if we click Save, I'm just going to go to my test folder and call it Test PDF. Okay, no, that's not what I want to do. I want to go back home. Now we want to do PDF OCR. This is kind of a two-step process with this software, which is unfortunate, but that's okay. And we tell it, that is 320 dot per inch file that we have. We don't want to straighten text. We want to save it in the same folder we got it from. I'm going to go ahead and set the output directory anyhow. There we go. And press start. And again, there's 100 odd pages, so it's going to take a little while, and it'll give you a count. This is using some open source software called Tesseract behind the scenes to do the OCR and the auto deskewing, that type of thing, but I always get that part done before I get to here. So when this is done, we will come back. I brought up a couple of the searchable PDFs. This one here was a book that wasn't in that great a shape that I did with the CZUR. I've got the cover, and I did this to show you I didn't get both of these quite the right size. This one is a little small, but I'll live with it. This is, however, when the pages are slightly different sizes, it is a little visually distracting, and if you're reading something very technical that requires a lot of study, it can, just make it just that much more difficult. If we get down to the pages here, we can see these are a little out of order, but the page numbers are in the correct place. There's usually something on every book, like the page numbers that they put in the same place on every page, that you can kind of judge if everything's lined up right. So if we get down through here, we can see that we've got our pages in about the right location. They look nice. If I zoom in here, we can see the text is all nice and clear. Everything's fairly square. In this particular book, like I said, it wasn't in good shape. There were slight distortions in some of the printing anyhow, so I think this scan came out really good. And if I search for something like, I don't know if there's a poke command on this particular machine. No. About, oops, print. Yes, print statement. Found 111 of them. Print, print, print. You can see the OCR does a great job. Found the print on that little label there. Another one I did, which was more pages, was the PC 1500 manual. The one online, it's got a lot of bleed through. There's a lot of illegible things in there. And I wanted to point out here that basing the PDF paper size on the dots per inch will even let it work with a manual that has mixed paper sizes, like these were foldouts that have the circuit diagrams on there. And even if we zoom way in here, we can still read all the little numbers that were on these parts. This is much better than what's online now. I updated the driver for my Brother scanner and printer, and noticed that the control center gave me more and better options for scanning. I was able to scan to PNG rather than a JPEG, and set the resolution up to 1200 by 1200 dots per inch. So I rescanned just the schematic pages because they have some really tiny text, and although the text on the printing isn't good, scanning them at 1200 by 1200 and then reducing that back down to 300 by 300 in GIMP made for a little better overall output in the PDF. At any rate, with a little bit of effort, you can produce some very nice scans and clean them up to something that's very usable that you can share with others online. Now, I'm going to put links to everything I've scanned that I've uploaded to archive.org. I'll put those in the description down below. And anything in the future I scan will also be there, so you can always look on my archive.org account and find it there. Keep in mind, I went to a lot of extra effort to touch these up that you wouldn't have to do, but I find it enjoyable. I usually only do maybe 10 or 20 pages at a time, touching them up, because otherwise my eyes get blurry. So it's just something fun to do, to take up a few minutes in a day, work on one manual for a week or so. Well, I hope you found this overview of the process of scanning and creating searchable PDFs from vintage computer documentation helpful. As I mentioned, this is just how I do it. There's lots of different software and variations of methods for creating these, so pick what works for you. I tried to concentrate on the hardware I had and freely available software. If you have any questions or comments, I sure would love to hear from you. Just leave them in that comment section down there below. Thanks to my patrons and everyone who helps support the Hey Birt channel. It's really appreciated. And until next time, bye.